I guess. Oh my gosh.
All right.
Ready. You're listening to the Journey Podcast. The Journey is a ministry of Southcrest Baptist Church for those in college or college aged. We hope this podcast helps you find your greatest pleasure and purpose in Jesus.
Welcome back to the Journey Podcast. I'm so glad that you're here, that you've taken the time to listen to us talk. Today, I'm so excited. We're going to talk about suffering.
That's what, you sound excited to talk about suffering. Yeah.
But yeah, we are. I know maybe I'm not super excited because suffering's no fun. But yeah, you going through the Can I Ask That series on Tuesday nights.
Yeah.
Just last night. Today's Wednesday, by the way. Probably not for you listening. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, I think I'm just excited to continue the conversation.
Yeah.
One of the things I said, and I think I believe that I think I believe this to be true. If I was to lead the college students with anything, to me this would be right up there with man, I want you to know this, because I do think it's that. I mean, I do think it's that important, because we're all going to experience it. It's just inevitable. Some are going to experience it to a greater degree, but suffering is just one of those things that's in what I think there's someone's testing out some drums.
Seems to be a band playing.
Do we keep going? Or what I was saying is I think we're all going to experience suffering to a degree. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to know how are we supposed to respond to it? Why does God allow it? Is there a purpose behind it, or is it all meaningless? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I do know, but
yeah. Yeah. You preached a sermon on it.
I did preach a sermon on it yesterday.
And I that's I think when I was young, and I know that this isn't everyone's experience, but when I was really young, I was a pastor's kid, all that. I think, growing up in church, you hear all of the crazy testimonies, and I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that feels this, but when I was a little kid, I remember having almost kind of a feeling that I needed. Almost feeling left out, that I didn't have this crazy testimony, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever, terrible stuff but I think what's interesting is that as I've grown up, and maybe this is just kind of a natural process of growing up, right? As I've matured and lived some life, I've seen that, man, everyone goes through trial, and everyone suffers. And so, and some people, that suffering starts when they're really young, but really everybody lives through stuff. So I think that's, I remember when you said that and thought, oh, really? This is the one thing you would take away. But honestly, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that if you haven't already, if you're a college student and you've been through a whole lot, or you're a college student and you have, you wouldn't say that you've suffered a lot, been through a lot of difficult trials. It's hey, this is life in a broken, sinful world, and you will someday.
Yeah.
And so we want to prepare you.
Well, and think season, about right? It. And I think the reason I say that, and it can sound almost like hyperbole, oh, this is the one thing I would want to I'd put up there with if you leave with something, leave with this. That sounds a little is hyperbolic a word?
Yes.
Okay. Is hyperbolic a word? Okay.
I think that works here.
It almost sounds a little hyperbolic, right? But think about it. With suffering, it's one of those things that is so significant in your life that if you aren't prepared, if you aren't ready to experience it, if you don't know how to respond when you experience it, man, it can really throw you off track. If you're a parent, you get married, have kids, and that child, God forbid, passes away, right? That has the capacity to throw you completely off course. And it has the capacity to like really destroy your faith. If you don't know like why these things happen or why God allows these things to happen or the purpose behind suffering at times. And I'm not saying that everyone's going to experience that, right? But that's a real world example. And so like, man, these are like, we've got to be prepared for it, you know? And that's almost a little morbid to say. Like, I'm not telling you like you've got to sit back and just wait for suffering to come upon you. I don't think that's not what I'm trying to get at. But what I am trying to get at is like, it's inevitable that some type of suffering, affliction is going to occur in your life because we do live in a broken world, like you said. And like, it's just a product of that.
Yeah. So last night you talked about 4 truths of suffering. And if you haven't, not sure when in order this will come out, but if you haven't listened to listen to the sermon, you should check it out. Really, I've really been enjoying, I guess there's only been 2, but enjoying these, Can I Ask That? Sermons, and it's been kind of fun, kind of topically look at these issues that we, like these questions that we all ask, and maybe sometimes feel like we're not allowed to ask them. But yeah, so you talked about you listed some truths about suffering, right? Suffering isn't one size fits all, and you can correct me if my notes are off on any of these, but said it's important to be a part of a local church before you experience suffering. Is that how you said it? Something like that?
And that was worded a little weird, but I think that gets at like, man, we're meant to carry each other's burdens. And so like before you're ever in it, like you need to be a part of a body, right? Of other believers. Yeah,
I remember you said we're meant to be a refuge for each other, and I really liked that.
Yeah.
You said suffering prepares us for what God calls us to do, which you kind of alluded to a second ago. And suffering is preparing you for something greater.
Yeah.
I got really excited because one of my favorite, definitely most like impactful pieces, like content, I guess you could say, on this topic of suffering. It's kind of old now, but is a Desiring God video. It's a Shane and Shane song. Big surprise. I love Shane and Shane. But it's called Though You Slay Me. You seen that one with the John Piper talk at the end? Yeah. And it's real powerful. But what he, and I kind of like joke about it. Yeah, I was like, I'll be John Piper. You do the.
I'll be Shane.
Yeah. Piper, he quotes a portion of Corinthians 4:17.
Yeah.
I think it's 17 is what he quotes. And it's like totally meaningful, right? Is the thing that he says. And it's not meaningless. And oh my gosh, like even just you reading the passage just like ignites something in me, right? Because I think about that video and I think about things that I've been through and all that. And that verse 17, I think that it's 17, the one where it says light, heavy. Does the light versus heavy?
Momentary light affliction.
Yeah, and I love the way you opened that up.
Yeah,
about like the point not being that your suffering is really just light and you need to get over it, right? Yeah. Which you definitely have to be taking out of context to say that. But you know what I mean? Like, I think it's easy reading that like light affliction, excuse me. Yeah. But the comparison of that being like, no, it's the eternal weight of glory, right? I think as he says.
Yeah.
And so it's like the comparison is the point, right? That like in eternity, the glory, maybe could you say like the blessing, right? Yeah. That comes from God, again, eternal, like that eternal weight of glory is just like incomparable.
Yeah.
To the afflictions that we.
It's almost overwhelming to think about it.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what Paul is getting at when he talks about in verse 18 when he says, so focus on the things that are unseen, not the things that are seen, right? Because that stuff you're going through right now or that you will go through in the moment does not feel light. In fact, you would probably say it's not light. But what Paul is saying there is he's saying, hey, compared to the eternal glory that you are going to experience when you are seeing Jesus face to face for the very first time for all of eternity, that momentary light affliction is going to be worth going through because of what is on the other side of it. And so what he's saying is he's saying ultimately, like, live life with that eternal lens, right? So whatever you go through doesn't necessarily mean just suffering, but like every aspect of life, like keep in mind that, man, what's on the other end of this is the eternal weight of glory that you're going to get to experience when you see Jesus face to face. And it's really hard for us to comprehend.
Yeah.
And I think even in those verses, it really doesn't even do it justice, to describe. Like, Paul's just trying to put words to something that he knows to be true. And while they're great words, even those words don't do justice to what we'll get to experience that day.
Yeah, I think that's tough. I don't want to take us too far off track on this, but like that is so tough. Like, what does it mean? Like you're saying, like, what is the eternal weight, like, of glory, like glory that that we're talking about? I think that's what's tough is like it is so hard to describe what that is, right? Because I know there's so many different like, and I think it's usually coming from a good place, from a positive place, but like there's so many just like theologically, I guess, like incorrect caricatures, maybe is the right word, of like what heaven is supposed to be like, what that weight of glory looks like, like where it's like, well, we're just going to be in a worship service singing all the time, or the pearly gates type stuff, right? And but I don't know, I like I said, I don't want to go too far off on this, but I think something for a long time that I've been thinking about is right, our statement here at Southcrest, right? Helping you find your greatest pleasure and purpose in Jesus, right? And realizing that like that perfectly fulfilled pleasure and purpose, like, it's such a great wording of like maybe a glimpse into what that eternal weight of glory looks like, right?
Yeah.
Like pleasure in the presence of Jesus, right? Like purpose and fulfillment in the presence of Jesus. I think is maybe a helpful way to think about that. Even though the specifics are hazy for us, right? That it's just like, okay, fulfilled, satisfied. And I really like the word pleasure because I think it's co-opted by things that are dirty or whatever, right? But it's just like, no, like Christ-centered pleasure, right? Like, again, fulfillment. I keep going to the same words, but anyways, I think that's so important to see.
Yeah, and you'll get to experience all of that without the stain of sin. Like right now, we experience it, but there's still this thing called sin really kind of holding us back from truly experiencing what it feels like to find our greatest pleasure and purpose in Jesus. But that moment when we see him face to face, we'll know for the very first time, this is what it was supposed to be like. This is what it was supposed to feel like. This is what I was created for.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what Paul's getting at when he's talking about the momentary light affliction that you might feel right now, or that you're going through right now. It doesn't compare to the eternal weight of glory that you are going to experience one day. So focus on the things that are unseen rather than the things that are seen.
So I know we're pressed for time, but before we go, one thing that I was like wanting to ask you about in this conversation, partially because like if I can level with you, is because when I hear my cue to go backstage and get ready to go on for the response song on Tuesday nights, it's like such an unfortunate reality that I have to miss some of like the closing of the message. Yeah. And so I know you talked about John 11, is Lazarus and Lazarus. Can I pronounce that properly? And Jesus, right? So like I just wanted to like, can you just update me on where you took the message there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the story of Jesus, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, the three people in Jesus's life that he was extremely close to. In fact, he considered Lazarus almost like his best friend. And we talked about how where Jesus was located at the time. So Lazarus was sick, and he gets word that Lazarus is sick, and he's deathly sick. And so they need Jesus to come. They're so close to him. They're like, hey, we're close to the one that can heal him. So we need him to come and heal Lazarus. Well, it's going to take him 4 days to get there. And what's interesting is in verse 6, it says that Jesus waited 2 more days after he got the news, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. We're like, why did he do that? Because all throughout the Gospels, he heals strangers. Like he heals just random people.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't he go to his best friend immediately to heal him? And so he gets there, and Martha comes to him, and she says, if you would have been here, you could have saved him. You could have healed him, right? And Jesus looks at her and says, Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me shall live, right? And we talked about how, was Jesus talking about Lazarus there? Maybe, but he's having this conversation with Martha. And I think what he was telling her is, you think in this moment what you need right now is for your brother to be back. But more than that, you need me. Like, that's what you need in this moment. And what he's telling her is, he's saying, I'm not a means to an end. Like, I'm not a means to get your brother back. I am the end. Like, that is the point of the story, that Jesus isn't just like another life, but he is the life. And so the whole point of the story is that what she's searching for is actually found in Jesus. And so suffering, and I love this. This was a quote by an author that I read. What she said is suffering is essentially an entry point into a relationship, like a first date is to marriage. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Like a first date is to marriage, or like birthing a child is to becoming a mom. It's an entry point into a relationship. And so suffering drives us to Jesus. And that's the whole point, is like when we're going through it, we're meant to be driven to him, because he's where life is found. And so that was kind of like the ending point there.
Dude, so good. So great. That makes you think of even like, I guess the second point about suffering and being a refuge for one another, and how like when I think back to, when my mom was sick and stuff like that, like, difficult times in my life, like, and being able to tell people that ask and are concerned and cared for me, were a refuge for me, right? Like, especially on the other side of all of that, like to be able to say, man, I don't know how to explain it, but like God has just been so near to me in this time, and I don't even really know how to explain like what I mean by that, but like he's just been close and patient with me, and it's like that's so cool. It's like like kind of wrapping it all together, like all of the things, the truths about suffering together. It's just like when you experience Jesus, you have something to share with people, whether that's like you need to share the gospel, or your brothers and sisters who are also going through suffering, being able to go like, oh gosh, I love you and I'm there for you. And he's there for you. Like he loves you. Like he's right in this, he's like right in the middle of this with you. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Thank you for catching me up.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's so good.
Well, I guess, it's probably time for us to wrap up.
Yeah. I think we're being signaled that time has passed. Man. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for listening. Thank y'all for running the cameras and stuff. Thank you to the band practicing in the room next to us. This is kind of where we're going to run this podcast from now on.
Yeah.
We're going to try to go a little deeper on what we've covered on Tuesday nights. We would love your feedback on that, though. Like if you want to leave a review and tell us what you think on all the platforms where you can listen, and share it, and let us know. Yeah,
our X handle is.
Do we have an X handle?
No, we don't.
I was like, are we on X? But yeah, we would appreciate your feedback. We hope this has been helpful to you. We hope that this has helped you find your greatest pleasure and purpose in Jesus. And we hope to see you around in the journey soon.
Let's go.
Let's go. You are sent.